Hello again and welcome back to the PhatPhish Guitar Studio. I'm Dave, and in this video I want to talk a bit about learning music theories, like the fundamental stuff that you need to know. I was talking to somebody the other day about learning guitar generally, like the concepts that you need to get your fingers around and get your head around, and something that kind of came up in that conversation was the importance of understanding music theory. You don't need to be like super proficient necessarily, but you need to know enough so you understand why you're playing the notes that you are, how they relate to each other, because that just opens up loads of avenues for you. And he says, okay, you've got loads of videos on your channel about music theory. What order do I need to watch them in? And when I came to think about it, well, there's not necessarily a straight answer to that, because it depends what it is you're wanting to learn, kind of in terms of how you're going to be playing guitar. So I kind of sketched something out just to kind of what's the order that you need to learn music theory in. So first thing you need to know is not the most important thing necessarily. As I always say, the most important thing is the major scale. But the first thing you need to learn is the chromatic scale. So what's the chromatic scale? Well, the chromatic scale basically is the notes that you have at your disposal. It's the 12 notes starting from C, going all the way up to C an octave higher, and then it repeats itself. But basically these are the notes that are on the fingerboard. So once you've learned the chromatic scale, you know the note names that you're likely to come across. You understand the idea that if you have a note name and you go up by a semitone, it becomes sharp. If you go down by a semitone, it becomes flat. The fact that B and E don't have sharps, you go straight from B to C and from E to F. Things like that. Knowing the notes on the within music and the notes that you'll find on the guitar fingerboard, then you could progress to the most important thing that you need to know, which is the major scale. Major scale. Now, the reason that I say that the major scale is the most important scale, that you'll learn the most important thing, is because it's the thing that all other music theory is referenced from. It's like your frame of reference. So if I talk to you about another type of scale, I'll give you the formula for that scale, but it's always like about what the difference is between the scale I'm describing and the major scale. So if I'll talk about a minor scale, I say it's got a flat third, it means it's like a major scale, but instead of where the third degree would normally be, it's down by a semitone. It's a frame of reference, so you absolutely have to know the major scale to be able to understand music theory. It's got quite a happy sound, so if you're playing like, metal or something really dark, you may never actually use the major scale much in anger, but you do need to know it. Then once you've understood the major scale, you need to start looking at chords. Start off with basic 3-note chords like triads, and then move on to 7th chords. It's also worth while you're acquainting yourself with triads, diads, 2-note chords, particularly chords like the power chord, 1 and 5 type chords, because if you're playing rock music, you need to know about power chords. And as you're learning theory, remember that you need to be able to put it into practice. So you're learning the theory behind scales. Learn where the notes of the scale are on the fingerboard. This is where a tool like PhatPhish is really useful, because it lets you visualize scales on the fingerboard. Likewise with chords, as well as learning the theory behind what notes are involved in chords, put the theory into practice. Know where to find those chord shapes on the neck. Again, you can put PhatPhish into arpeggio mode and it shows you the notes. An arpeggio basically is the notes of a chord but played in series. So like that are the notes of the C major chord but played as an arpeggio. So put PhatPhish into arpeggio mode and you can see where the notes of chords are on the fingerboard, and you can start to pick up shapes and know about different inversions of chords. So what's the lowest note in the chord? It gives you lots of different shapes. Once you understand that theory, understanding the relationship between chords and scale is really useful, particularly if you want to get into like writing your own songs, because you can understand how to lay down a chord progression and put a melody over the top. For me, the natural place to go, no pun intended, from the major scale is the natural minor. There's a relationship between the major and the relative natural minor, so use that as your starting point. Again, plenty of tutorials on my channel about music theory. You can go and have a look there, and plenty of other really good tutors on the internet as well. So certainly don't just look at my content. There's cast a very wide net. There's lots of really good tutorials out there on YouTube and elsewhere. So yeah, from the major scale and chords, triads and 7 chords, look at the natural minor scale. Because you understand the major scale by this point, you'll understand a bit of scale theory, you'll understand the difference, how the minor scale differs from the major scale, but you can take the principles that you learned from the major scale for like harmonizing that chord, the scale out in chords. You can do the same thing with the natural minor. The next thing I'd suggest that you take a look at are pentatonic scales. So if you learn the major and the natural minor, look at the major and minor pentatonics. Minor pentatonic is just such a useful scale, and if you learn that, look at blues scales as well, minor blues and the major blues. If you want to be playing rock music, blues, that sort of thing, pentatonics and blues scales are really, really useful. So that, I think, that gives you like your basic fundamentals. If you don't know this sort of stuff, you're really going to be holding yourself back in terms of learning guitar, because this is like the real bread and butter music theory that applies to pretty much everything that you're going to be playing. Where you go from there, it depends on what music you want to play. Now, a natural place to go, I think, from there is modes. Now, modes is, and I realise I'm only like a few minutes into this video and I'm talking about learning modes. Modes is getting into more advanced theory, but if you can get your head around modes, it's really, really useful for soloing and getting if you like a better relationship between the lead lines that you're playing and the chords that you're playing over the top of. Other scales that you might want to consider learning once you got familiar with the major and the natural minor, there's the harmonic minor, which has got quite an interesting sound. So if you're going to be getting into like neoclassical type of stuff, the harmonic minor is really, really useful for that. Or there's the melodic minor, which is basically a major scale with a flattened third. See, it's said everything is referenced as kind of how it differs from the major scale. Melodic minor gets used a lot in jazz, so if you want to kind of go down jazz sort of route, looking at the melodic minor is useful. And when you know the harmonic minor and the natural minor, you can apply other theory that you've already learned about triads and 7th chords, and look at how you can harmonize those scales out into chords, and build progressions, play lead lines over the top, that sort of thing. If you want to look more into chords, you can start to look at extended chords, which are where you, rather than just having the 1st, 3rd, 5th and 7th degree, you start adding in things like 9s, 11s, 13s. Very, very useful if you're going to get into like down to the jazz sort of territory. Jazz tends to use more complex chords, so understanding extended chords is really useful for jazz, and also understanding like melodic minor and harmonic minor. And when you harmonize those out in chords, you start to get altered chords, have things like flat 5th degrees and so on. So don't wait if you don't kind of understand what I'm saying when I say like chords with like altered chords and flat fifths and so on. You will do once you learn some basic music theory. But yeah, harmonizing out the harmonic and melodic minor, you get these different types of chords. Some of those chords are very useful for playing in jazz. They've got a more complex sort of sound, so you may want to go start looking at those if that's your aspirations, to go down more of a jazz route. And again, those harmonic and melodic minors, you can look at those in terms of modes as well. As well as all of that, in pure theory, it's useful if you can learn music notation as well. You don't necessarily have to be at the stage where you can just sight read. You just look at a piece of music notation, just dots on a line, and just be able to play what you see. That's a really useful skill. If you want to go become like a session musician, things like that, very, very, very useful skill to have. But at the very least, be able to understand what those dots on the page mean. So if somebody gives you a piece of music to learn, you can kind of go and say, well, that's a C and that's a D, and that D lasts for twice as long as that C, and you can kind of start to play what you're seeing written down. Not necessarily sight reading, but being able to understand music notation is really useful. You're not always going to be able to rely on tablature. Tablature, written specifically for guitar, is useful. Fairly easy to understand, but actual proper music notation, it's worth knowing that as well. So there's a lot more to music theory than the stuff that I've mentioned here, but those I think are also the things that I would encourage you, if you want to understand music theory, those are the things that you need to know. Starting off with the fundamentals and then kind of getting a little bit more advanced. You know, if you want to be strictly a rhythm player, you worry more about chords. If you want to be a lead player, you think, oh, okay, you're going to want to play more like scalar type stuff. But no, you need to know the theory behind the chords as well, because the lead lines that you play relate to the chords, and you'll be playing better lead lines if you do them kind of in sympathy for the chords that you're playing over the top of. Okay, I hope you found that useful. If you did, please click like down there. If you really liked it and you want to see other things that I post on the channel, then please click subscribe, which is also down there, and click that bell icon, which apparently makes a thing happen and is better for my channel if you click that bell. If you want to leave a comment, you're more than welcome. I don't always see comments that are left on videos though, so if you've got a specific question that you want to ask me, whether it's about music theory, guitar playing, guitar equipment, anything at all, you're better off going here, fill that form in, send your question in. I'm guaranteed to see it and I can get around to answering your question in a future video. Okay, that's all for now. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.